Hi everyone, this is Donny Lowy from Closeoutexplosion.com, a wholesale business in Brooklyn, New York. Today I'd like to discuss with you wholesale clothing for flea markets. So I once upon a time was a flea market vendor myself, and more currently I supply merchandise to many resellers, including flea market vendors, so I've gained some personal experience in the kind of clothing that sells at flea markets. Having said that, every flea market's going to have a different customer base, and you should be familiar with the customer base that you're serving, and that's actually my first tip. When you are going to set up at a flea market, if you're already there or you're considering selling at a flea market, find out who the customers are. Walk around, see what they're buying, see who the successful vendors are, see what kind of clothing they are selling to their customers, and importantly, know the price point that the customers are buying that clothing at. That will allow you to know how much you can pay for the clothing. Now, many flea market vendors want to focus on low price clothing, which is okay, but you should know that flea market customers want a very low price on the clothing, but a low price compared to the original retail value. In other words, if you have a t-shirt that doesn't have a brand on it, let's just say it says American t-shirt on it, and it's made in Pakistan, it's 100% cotton, it's a decent quality t-shirt, but no brand on it, so they might want to pay $1 for it, they might want to pay 50 cents for it, because there's nothing to distinguish that t-shirt from another t-shirt, perhaps except for its quality. But on the other hand, if you have a Fruit of the Loom t-shirt, then the quality is going to be better, and also it's already a brand name. If that Fruit of the Loom t-shirt, for example, sells for $2 at a store, then if you offer them that t-shirt for $1.25 or $1.50, you're still giving them a lower price than the original retail price. Now, the price of Fruit of the Loom t-shirts does fluctuate, so the numbers I gave you are just an example. Let's say another example, or I was going to say a more accurate example, could be, let's say, a Tahari dress. You might feel, wait, why should someone sell a Tahari dress in a flea market? No one's going to buy it. But what if it's a $200 Tahari dress, which you're able to sell for $40? That's a substantial discount. And as long as you buy that dress for less than that, you might be able to make a good profit on it. Now, if you sell only at flea markets, you do need to be very careful what you buy, because that's your only outlet. But if you sell on eBay as well, if you sell on Amazon, if you sell to people that you personally know, then you could take a chance on different merchandise, bring it to the flea market, and if it doesn't sell at the flea market, you can sell it to your other customers. Now, in the flea market business, I would say you generally have three categories of items that are sold. You have used clothing, and this is, of course, we're talking about within clothing. You have used clothing, you have slightly irregular clothing, which I would, even though it's not used clothing, but I would put it closer to that category within the used clothing category. Then you have non-branded clothing, which just has a generic label. It's a name that no one is familiar with, or it's just a generic name that's put on the clothing. And then you're going to have brand name clothing. Now, the challenge with selling brand name clothing at flea markets is that customers are going to be suspicious if the clothing is authentic. So, number one, you should always carry authentic clothing. Number two is the clothing which is very high quality, which is generally, brand name clothing is generally very high quality. So, if it's authentic, customers should be able to look at it and feel, and they should be able to tell that it is legitimate and it is authentic. Now, you might want to have with you the invoices of who you bought the clothing from, not, of course, to show your customers, but to show anyone who wants to check the veracity of your claims that the clothing is authentic. If you are going to have brand name clothing at the flea market, make sure that you can sell it at a very low price compared to the original retail price, but here's the catch. You don't want to sell the clothing for too low of a price, or customers will either believe that the clothing is damaged or imperfect, or that the clothing isn't authentic. So you want to find a middle ground between having a low price, but at the same time, not too low. Now, another advantage of setting up at a flea market is you can introduce yourself to the other vendors, and if you have good clothing which you paid for a price which is substantially below the regular wholesale price, at the end of the flea market, you can go around and sell your clothing to other vendors. When I sold at the flea market, I made some sales to some of the other vendors of the clothing that I had. They really liked what I had at really good prices, and at the end of the day, I was happy to sell it to them, provided that they wouldn't be selling the clothing next to my spot the next week. And sometimes when I had a limited quantity of a certain item, for example, I once had a really nice closeout on men's dress shirts, and they were the color red, and I only had 100 of them. So I sold about 20 or 30 of them to customers at the flea market, and then at the end of the day, I sold the remainder to another vendor for a decent price. I made a good amount of money, and I was able to move out the remaining, let's say 70, 80 shirts in one shot. And now I wasn't concerned about that vendor being right next to me, because even when he sold the shirts the following week, I didn't have any more of those shirts. So he wasn't competing with me. Another thing you can do when you sell at a flea market, if you have good clothing, and the key is whether the clothing is, used, and I prefer not to use clothing, but whether it's used, whether it's slightly regular, whether it's overstock brand name clothing, make sure that it's clothing that your customers will be excited to buy from you. This way your customers will return to your flea market booth to buy more clothing from you in the future. And I recommend, if you have a good rapport with your customers, take down the contact information of your customers, whether it's their phone number, whether it's the email address, and follow up with them. You might be able to make some good deals with them outside of the flea market. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video. You're definitely welcome to visit my wholesale warehouse in New York. My website is closeoutexplosion.com. Have a great day.